Welcome back to the channel. My name is Ethan Corson, and today I'll be telling you the crazy story of how I podiumed overall at the Giro d'Italia Ride Like a Pro USA. I'll also explain some tactics I learned in this interesting race format, and without further ado, let's get into it. I arrived at the race eager and ready to go. I trained hard that week and was ready to use my fitness. I geared up and began scouting out my competition to see who'd I'll be racing. I tend to do this before most races just to see who to watch and who's going to be a threat. I towed the start line ready to race. I didn't know what to expect since this was, after all, the first ever Giro in America. They're usually done in Europe. But what I did know was that I was going to race my bike. I was going to do the thing that I love to do. The dramatic music started and the siren rang. The adventure had begun. Now, I'd like to explain the race format. It is similar to a Grand Fondo's format. There are time sections varying between 3 to 5 of them, and whoever has the lowest accumulated time across all the time segments wins. However, with this racing format, there are also came new race tactics that I was going to have to learn and fast. Here's an example. If you start the segment 3 seconds after your opponent, which is super important and really big, but then finish at the same time as them, you gain 3 seconds. So if you start before them, you start after them and then finish at the same time, you can gain time that way too, instead of just having to start at the same time and then beat them to the finish. Now with that in mind, let's get into the race. Segment 1. The first segment was unfortunately not filmed. I had trouble turning the GoPro on with my gloves since it was so cold. We started the segment fast. There were around 50 people with us, and it made it tricky to move around in the group. There was one team that had 9 to 10 guys, and they called themselves Pontevedra Racing. It is a known team here in Florida. They attempted to take control of the race when we started the first segment, but they did struggle to organize themselves, which costed them. We continued to travel around 28 to 30 miles per hour for a few more miles, but then when nearing the end of the segment, the chaos had begun. Everyone started jostling for a position, hoping to find the right wheel. I, on the other hand, already knew which wheel was the most desirable. The sprinter on Pontevedra. I spotted him moving through the group, positioning himself near the front, so I invited myself into their lead-out train and successfully infiltrated it and caused more disorganization in their team train. The team then began their lead-out, but timed it wrong and perfectly delivered me to the finish, and for the time being taking first place. In between the segments, we were very chill, sitting around 20 to 22, not much effort when you're in the draft. The second segment. And now for the second segment. This is when I saw the games begin. The PV guys started slowing a lot to get that time advantage I mentioned earlier. However, I played the games and we started the segment at around the same time, give or take a few seconds. This segment was around 10 miles long. It was the longest segment. I basically just sat in the entire time except for one part where I rolled off the front, but then sat up after seeing the motivation of the team, and they had 5 guys on the front chasing me, so I didn't really bother trying to break away. This segment wasn't too exciting because of its length. I didn't know where the end of the segment was, but I knew it was coming up. So I jumped on the PV sprinter's wheel, which I knew would place me in a prime position coming into the finish. But by the time I saw the end of the segment, it was too late. One PV guy had already started sprinting, and I was on the other PV guys, and we basically came in together. I was in the top 10 finishing that segment. So I still maintained a good result, but did definitely drop down to 6th, and I was in 1st, so lost some time there. The third segment. Upon our approach to the third segment, the PV guys really slowed to basically a crawl, like they were like wanting the track stand. They then dropped off the back of the group even more. So like literally they were crawling before the start of the segment. After seeing that, I decided I wouldn't wait for them and attack the start of the segment to hopefully drop them and latch onto the group up the road. I was banking on the group ahead to start rolling once I got there and force my competitors behind to ride the segment by themselves instead of with the group. But that didn't work. They made the bridge and we came in together. However, that maneuver did cause the leader to lose a lot of time, as well as some other top-ranked riders to fall down the leaderboard, and in return launched me to 2nd by a handsome margin. And by handsome margin, I mean like 8 seconds. But in this race, it literally came down to 2nd, so every second matters. 8 seconds is a lot of time to get back. Segment 4. Segment 4, the final segment for all the marbles. It was anyone's race at this point, with only a second or two separating me and 1st place. We came into the segment as slow as a snail, like to the point where we could basically track stand. I made sure the PV sprinter started the segment ahead of me because he was the only competition I knew of that would challenge 1st place. I played the game and stopped right before the segment start for like 3 seconds. I think it was like 2, and made sure that the other PV guys started right after me. So now with at least 3-second buffer, all I had to do was finish at the same time as him, right? Well, coming into the sprint, I decided to leave his wheel and I chose his teammate's wheel, which proved to be the right decision. I then followed his teammate's wheel and came in just ahead of the PV sprinter guy I was talking about. But after the calculations were done, his teammate's wheel, who I thought wasn't a threat, got a lot of time back on that segment, which launched him to 1st, and the guy I was chasing the whole race and trying to beat him ended up beating me by less than a second because I didn't wait a little longer before the start of the segment. In conclusion, I ended up in 3rd place, which is great for a solo junior versus 10-man team. I think I did pretty well. The time gaps from 3rd to 1st was 4 seconds, and from 3rd to 2nd was less than a second. We're talking milliseconds. So the podium was within 5 seconds. Like, that's crazy. Like, 1st to 3rd overall was only like within 5 seconds. I had a good time racing my bike, and thank you to everyone who supported me. And that's the story of how I podiumed overall at the Giro d'Italia Ride Like a Pro USA. Thank you for watching, and if you liked this video, consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind. Also, comment down below your favorite color. Thank you, and like the video.